Hello everyone, welcome to THLGK. Today we are going to talk about the evolution of religion. And the objective is to show you how religion evolved throughout the ages. Keep in mind that this is a very summarized episode. And you see, given the span of time, we'll be focusing on the most important aspects when it comes to this evolution. So, if you find anything interesting, be sure that you can dig much deeper and find much more detailed information out there. With that being said, let's get to it. So, let's start by bringing up our timeline. There we go. So today, our timeline starts here at around 100,000 BC. Look, keep in mind, the further back we go, the harder it is to precisely date something, and the more difficult it is to find consensus. Some will say 100,000, some will say 300,000, some will say around 60,000. It's a mess. I'm going, to make math easier, when I'm a conservative position, placing it around 100,000 to 60,000 BC. This is where I'm placing the origin of religious thinking. It's not religion. We don't have an organized structure. We have religious thinking, which is, what originates better out of ignorance, out of not knowing the world. Oh. Okay. There we go. So, our ancestors did not understand how the world worked. They lived in fear and awe of nature, but they didn't understand nature. They were ignorant towards the world we live in. And it's from their ignorance that religious thinking is born. I'd say it basically tries to fill the gap in the knowledge. So, in this time period, from let's say around 100,000 or 60,000 to around 10,000 BC, we have a religious thinking, let's say, that's closer to animalism, which is something that's still around today. It's more like the forces of nature, So we have lightning, volcanoes, tsunami, rivers, the forest. These forces of nature, these elements of nature, they are given a supernatural, in today's terms, that means they are understood through a religious lens. So in this time period, let's say around 9,000 years, will be marked by these forces of nature, kind of more abstract, right? They don't have yet form. It's more of a shamanistic religion, because it's very important to note, I will put it right here, that in this time period, humans were hunter-gatherers. And that means society was more egalitarian, closer to nature. Didn't have very structured hierarchies. We were nomadic, we were always on the move, we were always facing new challenges. So religion itself, religious thinking itself, mirrored that. And when it started coming closer and closer to 10,000, around 10,000 BC, is that we start determining that this period is more, or has more, of a polytheistic nature. Which is the belief in multiple gods, or in this case, forces of nature. And it's not only the belief. Here we go. Nature. And it's not only the belief, but it's also the worship. So, not only our ancestors were polytheistic, but they were also polylatric. I have to be careful here. Let me put polylatry. It's easier for you to find. Which is the worship of multiple gods or forces. These two elements, they originate together. And you soon understand the need to make this specification. So, as we come closer to 10,000 BC, things start taking a shift. Why? Because in around 10,000 BC, our ancestors developed agriculture. And with agriculture, it came sedentary societies. And finally, the establishment of hierarchies. Yes, hierarchies were on Ctrl C because I always mess up writing it. So, there we go. And in this time period, if you are interested should check it out here around 10,000 BC. The scholars, they say there was a crisis of consciousness for the hunter-gatherers, shifting from the societies they used to live in to these more sedentary hierarchical societies. And not only there was a crisis of consciousness, it appeared there was a crisis of religion as well. Because in this time period, again, as we got closer to 10,000, the gods also started evolving. So from what these more elemental, abstract forms, when you get closer to 10,000, around 10,000, they started taking human form, or human animal form, right? And they started looking more like the gods that we know from history. The representation becoming more human-like. And not only that, the gods starts mirroring human society. And again, we are talking polytheism. There was no one god in this time period. So it's always multiple gods. And those gods start assuming particular roles. They don't start assuming because they don't exist. They start to be given particular roles by society. So since you are in a hierarchical society now, you have a chief, you have a king, you have an emperor. Now the gods have chiefs, kings, emperors. That's usually why you have a king of the gods. And those gods have courts. Why? Because the human counterpart has a king and has a court. It's around here that the ignorance aspect of not knowing, it still exists. But it's around here that it starts taking the shape of social control, because now you have a different structure of society. You have those who give orders and those who have to obey. So, to consolidate the powers, the higher class use the gods. So that's why religion starts taking the shape of control of society. It's fascinating because most people, and I was included among them, don't really think about this. Look, we have from 100,000 all the way to 10,000 BC, around 10,000 BC. 90,000 years. Where were the gods of agriculture? Like, don't the gods interact with humans so much? Don't they teach humans the things that interfere in the world? You can even try to put the one god here. It's not. But where were they to teach them agriculture? For 90,000 years. So we are talking 90% of human history. Considering this date, it's much, much older. But 90%, there's no agriculture. And then when we create agriculture, the gods of agriculture appear. The gods start appearing. They are created as we start developing the areas they are needed. Here, around 8,000 years BC, it's when we start developing metallurgy. What happens? The gods of metallurgy start appearing to reflect this change in society. So as society evolves, the gods themselves evolve. The gods start appearing. Their organization starts shifting. They just fit the roles we assign them to. This is what religion is. So polytheism, and we are close to the next shift, basically ruled from 100,000 years ago all the way to 500 BC. So for 99,500 years, if I'm not screwing up the math, we were polytheistic and polylatric. These two things, they exist simultaneously. We believed in multiple gods or forces of nature, and we worshipped multiple gods or forces of nature. And this went on for 99.5% around that of human history. But once again, around 500 BC, a shift occurs. Here, let me set this up. The region of Canaan, today called Palestine, around 600 BC, 580 something, the Babylonians invade the kingdom of Judah, and they take the ruling class, not the people, the ruling class, the king, the priests of Jerusalem, artificers, craftsmen, maybe military personnel. They take them to Babylon, thus beginning the so-called Babylonian exile. It's around then that these priests make a shift in religion. It's debatable if that was the first. Some present previous elements, what history they could be. It doesn't matter. What matters is that this is the one that alters religion to this day. When they returned to the land allowed by the Persians, they started imposing, this is the word, imposing monolatry. The people of the land. And monolatry is the worship on a single God. This is why we had to make the distinction between polytheism and polylatry, because even though polytheism and polylatry, they basically originate at the same time, monolatry is an opposition to polylatry. Because monolatry, you only worship a single god, but you still believe multiple gods exist. This is the God of the Bible. So you can be a polytheist, believe in multiple gods and worship in multiple gods, But you can be a polytheist, you can believe multiple gods exist, but only worship one. And that only works through imposition. Again, keep that in mind. So these priests, they forced on the people that remained in the region of Canaan, the region of Palestine, they worship on a single God. And now things start picking up because you see, we had 9,500 years. Now, between 500 and the year 0, some even put past the year 0. So around this time period, keep that in mind. A new thing will gonna appear. A new shift. So look, you are polytheist, you believe in multiple gods, but you are only allowed to worship one. And again, this is the God of the Hebrew Bible. If you open, for instance, and read the Ten Commandments, I am God your Lord, shall have no other God before me. It doesn't say there are no other gods. People read that verse as if there are no other gods because we already been indoctrinated in monotheism. But it's not what the text is telling us. The text is saying that you are not allowed to worship the other gods that they thought exist. They are allowed to think they exist, they're just not allowed to worship them. But then, between 500 and year 0, what will appear, let me write it up here, is the natural transformation. You worship a single God because there is only a single God. It's in this time period that monotheism is going to appear. Monotheism is the belief in a single God. See how this natural progression, natural evolution of religion worked? At first, and for most of human history, polytheism and polylatry. Then, around 500, these priests here develop monolatry. You are only allowed to worship one God. And then the logical conclusion is, well, I'm only allowed to worship one God because there is only one God. But is that the end? If you start thinking about this progression, you realize, no, something will come up after this. Around 1700 AD, the next shift in religion will occur, in direct consequence of monotheism, which is the appearance of atheism. No God exists. No God is real. Some try to claim that before, in the Greek period, Greek philosophers, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant then. This is when it becomes truly relevant. which is the current appearance in the evolution of religion. And remember, it's not like once something appears, the other one dies. There's still polytheism to this day. There's still polylatry to this day. And there's monotheism to this day. Monolatry is a bit difficult because being monolatric and polytheistic is quite rare. And there's atheism now as well. And where we go from here? What's the future holds? We can only speculate. Okay, I've said quite a lot, so let me try and summarize it. So from 100,000 BC to 10,000 BC, I try to show how religious thinking came into existence. And it was to fill the gap our ignorance of the world left, to try and understand the world. Because we feared it, and we face it with awe, and whatever other reason you may want to find. But the point is, we didn't understand, so the religious thinking was one of the way our ancestors taught to fill that gap. And our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, nomadic, living a more egalitarian, closer to nature society. And I'm not putting any value in it. I'm not saying, oh, this is good, or this is bad, this is better, this is... No, I'm just saying how it was. Around 10,000 BC, our ancestors developed agriculture. And it's around this time that the god starts taking shape, become more human-like, human-animal-like. Because society becomes more sedentary, hierarchy starts coming into existence, and religion now, instead of being what used to fill a gap because of our ignorance, it starts becoming a mechanism for these new ruling classes to socially control the peasants. And the gods, religion, start mirroring human society. If you have a king, you have a king of the gods. You have a court, the gods have a court. You develop agriculture, the agricultural gods appear. You develop metallurgy, the metallurgy god appears. You develop transportation, the transportation gods appear, and so on. If this process, this polytheistic, this belief in multiple gods, and this worship in multiple gods, polylatry, continued uninterrupted to this day, we probably have the same thing. The internet god would appear, the space god would appear. This is the idea. As we develop, as we discover, as we understand more, the gods start appearing. So, from 100,000 BC to around, right here, 500 BC, 9,500 years, we were polytheistic and polylatric. We believed in multiple gods and we worshipped multiple gods. But around 500 BC, monolatry, the worship on a single god, started being imposed on the people of Canaan. Once again, they still believe in multiple gods, but they are only allowed to worship one. And from that, the natural development progresses. You only worship one, no longer because you were forced to, but now because there is only one. Which is the birth of monotheism, the belief in a single God. This is, in my opinion, the single most terrible thing that happened in human history. Because the things that this will produce are terrible. We'll get there at some point. But the principle is, monotheism, intrinsically, by its origin, by its nature, negates the other. They negate all the other gods. And the only one who can do that in a society that has been polytheistic and polylatric for 9,500 years is through imposition, through force. Through force. Yes, the only way you can make a society shift from polytheism to monotheism is through force. Which was what happened. It happened here around 500. The priests, backed by the Persians, used force on the people of Canaan. It happened in the times of Christianity. When they became the religion of the empire, they did it through force. It happened in Islam, through force. This is why I say monotheism is one of the worst things that could ever happen to humanity. And what monotheism does is, imagine this, imagine a monotheist looking at all gods, they pick a knife and they shove it in the heart of every single god, killing them. None of those gods exist. And then, when they come to the last one, they throw the knife out and bow. But this one does. This is why monotheism is a cancer in human society. It is. Have no doubt about it. And it's not benign, it's metastasized. I hope I got that right. You either are forced to believe what they want you to believe, or they will disrespect you. If they have power, they will kill you. I'm not inventing this. This is history. All you have to do is study the history of the Christian Church, of Islam, of Judaism, the three big monotheistic religions. Now, look, around 1700 AD, can you really be surprised that someone watching the field of dead gods, they see the knife, they pick it up, they see the last god standing and shove it in his heart. The last god falls. There are no gods. It's simple. Atheism is monotheism taken seriously. The monotheist does exactly what the atheist does. They both do the same thing. They are both God killers. The atheist is a God killer. The monotheist is God killer. The difference is the atheist has the courage to kill every one of the gods. Every single one. He has no shame. The monotheist doesn't. The monotheist does not have the courage to kill the last god. A god he decided to bow and serve. That's the difference. So, it was only natural that atheism would emerge within this scene. And why did it take this long? Let's say from the year 300, I didn't put it here, but from the year 300 up until 1700, they have here 1400 years. Well, because if anyone rose before that, during the time the Christian church had power in Europe, they were killed. Huh. Really? Do you have any doubt about this? It's only when the church starts losing power that atheism can go and kill their God. Because they don't have to face the violence from monotheism. The violence that does not tolerate divergent thinking. This thing out there of today saying, oh, Christianity is for human rights, Christianity for freedom of thought, Christianity is for freedom of speech. BS. BS. They say that because Christianity doesn't have the power. If it did, it would enforce everything they wanted, because they did. They pretend to ignore history. Christianity had a state. The Pope was the head of a state. Do you think that was paradise on earth? Come on. So yes. Oh yes, I do have a problem with monotheism. I mean, I make that unclear? I don't think so, right? I think I made it pretty pretty clear that I have a problem with monotheism and monolatry. Polytheism? Not really. In fact, it's much more logical. Look, for 9.5% of human history, around that, it's probably more if you take my timeline, but let's say around that. For 9.5% of human history, we were polytheists and polylatric. For 0.5% that we are monotheistic and monolatric, which makes more sense. Our ancestors answered that for us. Now, let's wrap this up. How about the future? Did the evolution of religion ended with atheism? I don't know. Just like religion doesn't know the future, I also don't. Here we have possibilities. I mean, maybe we create a God. AI, right? Maybe we become gods. The integration between biological and mechanical. Maybe we destroy ourselves and have to rebuild from 100,000 BC and probably polytheistic again. Hopefully, if that happens, there is no 500 BC in our way. Maybe it's atheism. Maybe we live without the gods. Who knows? Well, this is it for today, everyone. I think this one is a bit of a ride, right? Because it's very hard to truly know the further back we go in time. For instance, I didn't mention, but I find fascinating the hypothesis of an ancient civilization. Did it exist? Didn't exist? I don't know. I like the argument for it existing. I want it to be real, but I don't know. So imagine we find evidence of an ancient civilization, and we are talking here, let's say, before 10,000. That would change a lot. That might break everything I said. Probably not, because even if an ancient civilization existed, they are probably polytheists. But we don't know. Maybe they weren't. But since we have no evidence for it, it's still in the hypothesis phase. And for the other, I believe it's a theory, if not a fact, about the development of religious thinking, of human society. Religious thinking not so much, but human society being hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years. For that we actually have evidence, so I stuck with that, but there is a possibility. Also, remember I said we make easier to do math? So we have 100,000 plus 2,500, 2,000 years. So 102,000 years of history. I would kill 2 years, so 2,000 years. Let's say 100,000 years of history. And we've only believed in one God for the past 2,500. So, for around 97,500 years, 97.5%. See, I told you to make math easier. We, as a society, as a collective, we believed and we worshipped multiple gods. Then this abomination that arose 500 years ago. And it's been basically dominating Western thought for 2,500 years. It's just 2.5% of human history when it involves religion. So, which is natural? This is the question. Which would be more natural, more logical? Where was this one God, which are actually three, because Judaism has one, Christianity has one, Islam has one. Oh no! Judaisms have many, Christianities have many, Islam have many. Because they're all different, this God, depending on the denomination you follow, when the sect you follow. Even in a individual level, they're all different, but let's pretend it's one. It's not logical at all. Not only it's not logical, as I mentioned, it's a cancer. Because it completely disrespects the other as a intrinsic element of the religious thinking itself. Our God is real, all others are false. I mean, do you realize that the accusation they throw at atheists for saying you cannot prove God doesn't exist, they do the very same thing with all the other gods except their own. If there was a little bit of coherence, they would never be able to claim the other gods don't exist, because they cannot prove it. But they can. They can prove the others don't exist. Isn't that fantastic? So, understanding the scenario in which religion came into existence, understanding polytheism, polylatry, monolatry, monotheism, and then atheism, understand this, how religion evolved and changed throughout time, helps understand how this whole thing was made up, how it doesn't exist outside of human societies. We created religion to understand the world because we were ignorant. We developed religion to control society when we start dividing ourselves into class. We forced the worship in one God so we could gather resources. You'll see next week. Then destroyed all other gods to say only one exists. We forced that one throughout history on other people. And here we are today. Polytheism, by the way, still exists. You have Hinduism, you have Shintoism. There are still polytheistic religions. And as a general rule, you don't see them proselytizing, I don't think they even exist, proselytizing around, do you? They are there in their countries or within their expats. But no, the Judaism did what had to do in the beginning, terrible things, but then it's not a very proselytizing religion, is it? It's a very ethnocentric religion. Now Christianity and Islam, those are very proselytizing. Those are very imperial religions, conquest religions. And they have the courage to say that Christianity is peaceful. Oh, come on. But okay. That's it. Otherwise I'll keep going. Thank you so much for watching. If you like, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, checking the other social media. For now, mostly X. And I will see you all next time.